Greetings from Wyoming, OSY Guy here, and this is my tutorial on how I do a clean installation of the latest version of Windows 10. Now, I'm an open source kind of guy, and so I'm going to present this tutorial from an open source perspective. So here we go. In our scenario here, I want you to assume that we are in front of an unhealthy Windows 10 computer, but we've actually been thorough enough to run a couple of hardware tests. So the RAM test that we ran came back with no errors, and we ran a hard drive test that came back with no errors, and yet we are seeing very poor performance on this computer. We may not even be able to get into a login screen, which is bad news because then we can't even get access to the data on that computer. That's an unhealthy computer, but it's unhealthy not from a hardware perspective, but from unhealthy software. We probably have some sort of corrupt component within the Windows operating system. So we can get this computer back to a healthy state by doing a clean install of the operating system. Now, when I say clean installation, I'm talking about making sure that the hard drive on that computer is a blank slate. I want absolutely nothing on that hard drive before I start the installation of Windows. Now, if that's what we do, then we're going to be losing all of our users' data. So before we do a clean install, we probably ought to try to back up the user's data. Here's the open source approach that I use. I like to back up the user's data on that unhealthy Windows computer using a temporary live operating system on that computer. Now, here's what happens. If you use a bootable Linux flash drive and you boot to that drive, it becomes what they refer to as a live medium, which, in other words, that means you are seeing a functioning, usable operating system in front of you running on that unhealthy Windows computer. Now, a bootable Linux flash drive can certainly be used to install the Linux operating system, but that's not what we want to do, so we're not going to click on that install icon. Instead, we're just going to simply use that live session, and we're going to open up a Linux file manager and use that as the replacement for the Windows File Explorer. If we can do that, we can browse for the user's data folders, and we can back them up to an external drive. That's the approach I want to use. To create this bootable Linux flash drive, we are going to need, of course, a USB flash drive. We also need to have an external USB hard drive, which we will use to back up our user data. Our first step is to locate the ISO file for our favorite distribution of Linux. Now, my favorite version of Linux is Pop! OS, and that is the operating system that I'm using as I'm creating this video on this computer. So, when I download that popos.iso file, I'll end up with a file that will be about 2 point something gigabytes in size, and then that file needs to be installed onto a USB flash drive. We can't just copy that file over to the flash drive. We need to install it. So if you are in Ubuntu, the installer program is called Startup Disk Creator. If you're in Pop! OS, that installer file is called Popsicle. You open up Popsicle, and that will allow you to take that ISO file and unpack it and place it correctly onto a flash drive so that it becomes a bootable device. If you're not in front of Linux, instead you're in front of a Windows computer, then you can download the open source program called Rufus. A little bit more detail on that here shortly. That is the equivalent of Popsicle, if you will, for the Windows platform. So you can use that to install the ISO file successfully. Once you've installed that USB flash drive so that it's now a bootable device, The next step is to make sure that secure boot is turned off on that Windows computer that we're talking about. Oftentimes, secure boot is not turned on many computers, but sometimes it is turned on as a feature, and so we'll need to access the BIOS on the computer to make sure. The most common trigger key to access BIOS is to start tapping the F2 key immediately after you start the computer. That's the usual key. It's not the case all the time, but that's a good place to start guessing with anyway. After you access the BIOS, you're going to rummage through the BIOS screens until you find a section that refers to secure boot. You'll want to make sure that secure boot is disabled or is turned off. If it is showing as enabled, then you'll want to switch it over to disabled, and then you'll want to save that change to your BIOS. Now, when you reboot the computer again, you might get one final screen that will pop up that will be a one-time confirmation, basically saying we want to make sure that you intended to turn off secure boot. Type in this 4-digit code, and so it'll have a 4-digit code displayed. So you type that in, and then that will permanently turn off the secure boot until such time as you decide to turn it back on again by going back into BIOS. Okay, so if we have secure boot turned off, then we know that we can boot successfully with that USB flash drive that we've created. So we do one more boot from scratch, and we place that flash drive into the computer, and we want to bring up a boot menu. Now that boot menu is yet another keyboard shortcut. The most common shortcut to get to that boot menu is the F12 key, but you may have to do a Google search on that and see if you can get a better answer instead of having to just try to guess at it. When you bring up the boot menu, you're going to be looking for your flash drive that's listed in that menu. You select that, and then you will be booting to that Linux flash drive. I'm going to demonstrate how this all works by using VirtualBox. I have installed in VirtualBox a session of Windows 10 here, and it's actually running just fine. But we're going to assume here that this is now an unhealthy session of Windows 10, so we're going to insert a virtual USB flash drive of Linux. I'll show you how I would do that inside of VirtualBox. We're going to go to the settings section, and we're going to select storage, and here is the empty CD-ROM for this session of Windows 10. So I'm going to go find the ISO file for popos.iso and insert that. So that is now inserted. Just think of that as that I've inserted the USB flash drive here. So we're going to access the boot menu here in this Windows 10 by pressing the F12 key. So here we go. And I just pressed the F12 key, and it's showing now that I have some other choices besides just going to the hard disk. And so this USB flash drive is behaving as if it's a CD-ROM here, so we'll just press the letter C to go to the CD-ROM, and then now we are taking that Windows installation and booting into Linux instead, into Pop! OS. Okay, so we'll answer the language and questions here and the keyboard questions and get through that. And then now we have two major options that I want you to note. There's a clean install. We don't want to use that. That's going to install Linux. We just want to use the demo mode. So I'll click on demo mode and click on try demo mode. Now I have connected to this session. I do have an external hard drive, so we are going to access the user's Windows data. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to click on the word activities at the top left-hand corner, which will then show us some of our common programs that are available in this distribution of Linux. We're looking for the file manager, so there it is. It looks like a file drawer, so we'll click on that. That opens up the file manager in Linux. Now, the first thing we want to do is locate the user's data folder in Windows. So we're going to go to other locations, and we're not going to click on computer because that's just going to access the file system for our USB flash drive, so we don't care about that. So we're going to look below the first item and look for the next item. In this case, this is the Windows directory that we want to access here, and we can tell we're looking at the correct partition here because we can see the Windows folder, the users folder, program files, and so on. So we're going to burrow into the users folder, and then here is my user folder, so I'll double click that Canute folder. Now I'm going to tile this over to the left hand side, so we'll bring it over like that, and then we're going to go to the external hard drive that has been plugged into this, and we're going to open that up as a separate window. So we'll say open a new window, and we'll place it on this other side over here. Let's see, we're going to open up backup, and we're going to grab the user's data folders over here. So we're going to be looking for things like the desktop folder, the documents folder, the downloads folder, maybe the favorites folder, music, pictures, videos, things like that. And we're just going to do a copy and paste and bring those over to the backup folder here, and make basically a duplicate of all of our data. Once we have done that, then we're able to take our next step. It's because we've backed up our data. Now that we've backed up our user data, our next step is to get a hold of an ISO file of the latest version of Windows 10. Now, there are certainly many versions of Windows 10 that are out there, but the one that we're actually looking for is the one that I show at the bottom of the list, 1809. Now, 1809 is standing for the 2-digit year, so 2018, and 2-digit month, which should be September. But in Microsoft's infinite lack of wisdom, they refer to this 1809 version as the October release of 2018. So I've warned you. But we need to go get the ISO file for Windows 10. Now, I did a search. I went to a Google search page and typed in Windows 10 1809 ISO, and I'm looking for a web address that is specifically from Microsoft.com. I don't want to be going anywhere besides Microsoft.com. I want to be going to the official website, not to some fake website. Okay, so we're going to Microsoft.com. We're looking for the Windows 10 ISO file. So here we go. So we're at Microsoft.com. We are looking at the spot where we can download the ISO file. So where it says Select Edition here, I can choose below October 2018 update. I can click Windows 10, select Confirm. Then I choose the language and click Confirm. And then I will see a couple of options. The one that I'm most wanting to get is the 64-bit download. Haven't even tested out the 32-bit version of Windows 10. I'm not sure how successful that would be at all. But at any rate, if you click on the 64-bit download, you will be downloading that gigantic Windows 10 version 1809.iso file. It's about 5.2 gigabytes, so it's a pretty big download. But you will be able to pull that off of the Microsoft website, and you're good to go. That was done really easily, right? Except I have to remind you that there was a subtle moment there. I went and got that ISO file from a non-Windows computer, right? So I'm running Pop! OS, and I used my web browser to get to the Microsoft website, but I wasn't using Windows operating system. So here's the interesting twist that happens. If you are browsing, going to that exact same website, but you're going to the same website from a Windows platform, you will find that you suddenly can't get access to that ISO file. This is a Windows 10 computer that I'm accessing through my remote control software called Simple Help. And I have Firefox open, and we're looking at the exact same website that we were looking at before. There is no select update button here. There's an update now, and the problem with this one is that this is not going to access your ISO file at all. All it will do is download an upgrade program, a small program that you can then use to take this version of Windows that's running right here and update it to the latest version of Windows. That's not what we want. We want to get a hold of that actual full-blown ISO file. So, here's how we're going to do it. I have added an add-on in Firefox here that's called User Agent Switcher. So I'm going to click on the icon that accesses that. And in here you will notice that we can choose an operating system that we can make Firefox behave as if it thinks it's on an operating system other than Windows. So right now it's looking as if it's running on Windows, which would be, of course, correct. But we're going to masquerade as if we're some other operating system. So I'm going to select Linux in this case, and then I will refresh the browser page, and suddenly we have Select Edition showing up here, and we can choose the October 2018 update just like that. I actually got some very good information from a YouTuber who goes by the name Pure Infotech. He did a terrific job of putting out a video that explained this whole process on how to get a hold of an ISO file from the Microsoft website. And he explains it not just by how you would do it with Firefox, but he also shows you how you could use the Edge browser and how you could use Chrome and do the same thing. You basically cause those browsers to announce that they are on an operating system other than Windows, and then you can get that ISO file that easily. So it's a strange workaround, but now you know how to get that ISO file regardless of whether you were running a Linux operating system or Windows. Okay, now that we have the ISO file, we'll make sure that that ISO file is on a Windows computer, and then we're going to download to that Windows computer Rufus. Now, Rufus.ie is the location, the website location where you can go and get this Windows installer program. This is the program that allows you to take an ISO file and install that ISO file to a USB flash drive. Let me have you take a look at Rufus over here. I've got it right there, so we will say yes to that, and I'll dismiss that. So this is Rufus. I have already, in this computer, I have inserted a USB flash drive. So all we have to do at this point is identify our ISO image file. So I'll click on Select, and I go find the 1809 version of Windows 10, select Open, and now I'm going to create two different USB flash drives. The first one is going to be just like it's listed here. I'm going to change nothing else, and I just simply click on Start, and 20 minutes later we will have a USB flash drive that is partitioned with the partition scheme GPT. That is the latest partition scheme that is being used and is the most common scheme used on most Windows 10 computers. So we have a USB GPT flash drive, okay? Then I go back in and do the same thing, but I change to the older partition scheme called MBR, and then slip in another flash drive and create that second flash drive by clicking on the Start button. Again, it'll be another 20 minutes or so. And then you will have a second flash drive that could be used on... most of the time you should be able to use the GPT version of your flash drive, but every now and then you might be in front of a computer that is old enough that it doesn't handle the GPT partition scheme where it does handle the MBR scheme. So just wanted to show you that variation as well. Now, here are the Windows 10 screenshots as I install 1809. In this case, I'm installing it onto a VirtualBox machine, so we'll see those screenshots. Just step through a couple of those. If you happen to see a screen that looks like this, that says it seems to be requesting a product key, I need to explain this. If you have a Windows 8 computer, a Windows 8.1 computer, or a Windows 10 computer, it is most likely that each of those computers with a pre-installed version of Windows will have an embedded product key. So you won't be able to find a product key somewhere on the outside of the computer. And so what I'm really telling you is this. If you see this screen, you can successfully click on I don't have a product key, because by the time you're done installing this version of Windows, it will have found the digital product key that's already embedded there. So no need to try to come up with a key there. Now, you may see this screen also show up. If you are a United States user, then we're talking about two different versions of Windows, in this case, Windows 10 Home and Windows 10 Pro. You will want to make sure that you install the version that matches up to your digital key that you already have on that computer. So, you know, if it originally came with Windows Home, then you'll want to make sure that you select Windows Home again. That'll match up to your digital key. Or if it was installed with Windows Pro, then you'll want to make sure to select Windows Pro. Okay, enough of that. Next step, I go to Custom and I select Install Windows Only. This is the clean install that I always like to do. Now, this installation was being done in VirtualBox, and so it's not going to look exactly like it might have looked if you were in front of a machine that was previously running Windows. So I would like you to assume for a moment that you're seeing maybe 4 or more partitions showing up here. That would be an indication that the computer is running the GPT partitioning scheme, because you'll have at least 4 partitions showing in here. If you're running the MBR scheme, then you'll have a couple of partitions showing here. But here's the bottom line. If you see any partitions in here, my suggestion is that you delete all the partitions. So select partition number 4, click delete. Select 3, delete. Select 2, delete. Select 1, delete. You want to have it show up looking just like this, where it says unallocated space and nothing else. Then, after you have eliminated all pre-existing partitions, you click on New, and then you click Apply, and this will come up and say, we need to create some partitions automatically for you, and you just say, OK. And like I say, if this is a GPT machine, you'll see suddenly 4 new partitions showing up. In this case, VirtualBox just uses the MBR scheme, so we have two partitions, the system partition and the primary partition. The primary partition is the one that we want to format because that's where the Windows will be installed and where our data will go. So we click on Format, and then we click on Next, and then 10 minutes or so later, we will be installed into Windows 10, and now we have to configure it with the Cortana screens. Now, if you're like I am, you click on the microphone button down below and turn off Cortana, and then you answer the questions here. So it asks for the region. We say yes. Keyboard layout, make sure you choose the right one there. If you use a second keyboard, then add that. Otherwise, skip. Now, in some cases, I have customers who are genuinely using the Microsoft account in their business. They're using OneDrive, which they want to access that OneDrive again, and they want to access their license for Microsoft Office. And so in that case, it's really good to sign in with a Microsoft account and sign in with that user's password, and then you will synchronize that. So this particular customer I'm referring to already had one computer that was running with a Microsoft account. She was setting up a second computer, and she wanted to synchronize the OneDrive folder and synchronize so that she would be able to have Microsoft Office showing up on that second computer, and so that was a good answer for her. Otherwise, in most cases, I have my customers use an offline account instead. That seems to be the better choice in most cases. So you type in your username and you select next, and then you can also type in a password and so on. And so get through that section. Now, when it comes up and asks for, do you want to make Cortana your personal assistant, I usually click on declined in that case. I go through the privacy settings and turn off all of the privacy settings except one. I leave location turned on because I use a weather tile that responds well if we see the location automatically. So it's kind of good to do that. And then I click accept. And then it takes another 10 minutes or so, and then we have booted successfully into Windows. And now before I do anything else, I click on the Start button and select the gear icon, which opens up the Settings panel. And then I always like to make sure that I locate at the bottom of the Settings section. I look for Update and Security, click on that, and then click on Check for Updates. That should go and grab all the latest updates, and it will also help in one particular regard. Sometimes if you have something like a specialized video card, something like that, you will be running using a Microsoft generic driver, and so it's always good to click on Check for Updates, because Windows 10 is pretty good about going and grabbing the driver that is necessary for things like advanced video properties and that kind of thing. So it's always good to click on Check for Updates. That might take an hour or more, but it's well worth it. It'll be a good thing to do in the long run. I always like to take control of the Start menu. Let me bring you back over to my Windows 10 installation over here. Here is my Start menu. I have right-clicked on all the impractical tiles that show up in here and remove them. So, as an example, if I want to include the calculator as a tile over here, then I right-click on Calculator, select Pin to Start, and then it shows up over here. If I don't want that icon, I can right-click and select Unpin. So I did a lot of unpinning in here. There are a total of something like 22 or more tiles that are mostly unusable, so I just try to remove everything for my customer before I put it back in their hands. And I try to set up a start menu tile list here that is practical and usable for my customer.